The new Death Guard Codex is here, so this illustration is really awesome. That shows Typhus on a mountain of dead Ultramarines, and I have this brew of Typhus here. I can even use the finished miniature because I haven't painted the normal one yet. And I have some Ultramarines and other like test Space Marine paint schemes here in intercessor form. They will be the corpse part, and I think I put it on a 60mm base, so let's begin. The problem with the miniature is that the miniature has the scythe up like this, and he has that cool stoic pose here where he's just looking to the side with his scythe. But I will try to make that pose with the kit. And with the hands, the problem with the hands is one of the hands is holding it sideways and one of them is holding it like this. And I will try to use one of the hands from the Death Shroud kit to make this hand. And I will try to use his own hand for this hand. So let's see how it goes. First of all, I cut all the components from the sprue and cleaned them up afterwards. Unfortunately, there's that little Nurgling hanging on his leg, but I couldn't post the scythe as I wanted, so I had to get rid of that little Nurgling, unfortunately. But cool thing is, his arm still stayed on the model because I forgot it, so there you go. I've cleaned all of the parts up, and then I decided how to go about with the conversion. So I thought the easiest thing would be to cut the arms off on the joints so I could reposition them and rotate them a little bit. And then I assembled him in his glorious Abaddon-like armless form. But with the head, I turned the head to the side a little bit, but some components were blocking him, so I cut one of his rebreathers on the left side. I cut them off. I cut into the little horn a little bit and in the components that were blocking that, and I've smashed it and did so many things with that. And then in the end, the head was looking to the side as I wanted it. And then I was impatient, and when I glued the stuff together, it wasn't really cured yet. So I already fiddled around with the scythe, even though the other stuff wasn't glued. So yeah, with conversions like that, you just have to be patient. Sometimes you need to step away for half an hour or an hour and let it just cure, and then come back and do the next thing. So yeah, that's my tip for that one, but I was so impatient, I just fiddled around with it anyway. The next part was surprisingly easier than I thought it would be. So the scythe of one of the Death Shroud guys is the same size as Typhus's. So I used the Typhus scythe. So I used the left hand of this guy and the handle of the scythe. And from Typhus' scythe, I used the top part, but his hand had to go further up the wood, so I cut his hand out and replaced it with the free part up there. I thought this would be an easy enough conversion, so I've clamped this together now pretty much. But as you can see, he's kind of, when he looks to the side, he's just looking on his shoulder pad. Hey man, I've got something on my shoulder pad right there. So he's just like looking exactly at his shoulder pad, which is really stupid. So I think I will just cut off the shoulder pad at an angle here and just like trim something of a round thing in here and some blade-like bevels like on the other one. And yeah, I'll come back and show you what I got now. So I cut that edge off and I beveled it and I melted it a little bit and smoothed it with extra thin. And then it makes much more sense for him to look to the side because he can see something. Wow. And I mixed some green stuff together, and I use green stuff and super glue. So I put super glue down, green stuff on top, and then I smashed the components together, and then I tried to position them, but the green stuff in between the super glues makes it possible to still move the parts around a little bit. So this is on 5x speed here, but I was able to position it pretty quickly, so I think that was my first attempt, but in the end I just turned the scythe a little bit more onto an upwards position, but this was pretty much easier than I thought, because usually that's one of the parts of the process that takes the longest to position. Like, how many moving parts is that? Like 8 or maybe more moving parts at once. The only thing that fell off is his right hand slipped out of the scythe head later again, so I had to glue that a second time. And then while I was painting later, the scythe fell off another time as well. But apart from that, it was pretty good. And some of the areas I didn't like, I added sprue goo too. So the sprue goo is a mixture of Tamiya extra thin and some just leftover sprues you have. It just melts them down, and then it's a little gooey substance you can put on, but that dries really smoothly. So I added his namesake Typhus corrosion, that is texture paint, to those areas and made them a little bit more rough and corroded. And later, after I've painted it, I added even some more Typhus corrosion and some wash to it to make it different textures. But yeah, that worked really well in the end. And we can have a look next at the Space Marines. So I used Milliput Standard and mixed 2 equal balls of those 2 components, and then I smashed them together and mixed them. And you can see in the background the Space Marines are already standing there to wait to be used on the base. Then I thoroughly mixed the Milliput until it had a consistent color, and then I smashed the Space Marines into that mixture, and I added some super glue underneath, and I also broke some components like the arm off, and then I cut into the shoulder pads and everything and made some battle damage on them. And yeah, I just went around the whole base, drilled some holes in it and everything, and added more Space Marine components until I was happy with the size. And like a bolter on one position, and then another guy face down in the mass. And as you do, just go around, and then I fitted Typhus sometimes on it and saw if he's fitting on it or not. And then I thought, like, the bubbling components that are like dissolving already, I had little balls of green stuff, but I didn't like it in the end, so I added some nail art beads. They are like half spheres you can put on stuff, and I fashioned them in a way that they look like the Space Marine armor is already dissolving. And then I added some insects to the base as well, that are buzzing around. And then I also added some of the little plumes that are like smoke rising up, like from the acid that's dissolving stuff. This is what the finished model will look like in the end. And I just blue tacked those flies and the legs on the base. It will be much easier to paint the base separately, and the miniature and the fly swarm, the destroyer hive. And here's the comparison between the two. I like my new version so much more than this one. This one just like, oh yeah, fly my pretties. And this one is like, I'm gonna scythe you up, baby. I'm gonna scythe you up. Yeah, I have to cut the song off here because I don't want to get demonetized. Oh wait, I'm not monetized anyway. I'm gonna scythe you up. I'm gonna cut you down. I'm gonna lay waste to the Imperium. I'm gonna scythe you up. Okay, that's enough of the music. I promise not to sing anymore in this video again. And I primed all of the components, black for the base with Centerville Highlight Wravebone, Death Guard green for Typhus, and then Mechanical Standard Grey for the back. And I started painting. I laid down Talazar blue on the Space Marine, dead Space Marine bits, and then some Tesseract glow on these little bubbles. And then I toned it down because it was way too bright with some washes, so some diluted Nuln oil over it and some other washes, and the base was looking really good, but I thought these green bubbles, they should glow even more, so I added some fluorescent yellow paint over those, and with the eyes of the insects I painted them in red, and then I added some fluorescent pink over the eyes as well, that they glow even more. And first of all, I dry brush my models with Underhive Ash, so it looks like there's like dirt on the armor running down or even like some mold or whatever. It just gives a variation on the armor panels, that it's not all a uniform color. And I usually dry brush that from the top, so it's more top heavy, and then on the legs, for example, when I go down, or on the armor panels like on the wrist here, I do less on the bottom and more on the top. And I wanted to have a really bright white on the helmet, so I started base coating it with Karak stone. And then I went on and base coated everything on the miniature in a base coat, like lead belch on the metal. Then everything that is like a hose or a cable or whatever is Mephiston red. Metal, like that is bronze, is Warblock bronze. And then Hashot copper if a brighter metal color is needed. And then a little pox, Avalanche Sunset. And for example, everything that's flashy and the little exhausts on the top is Buckman's Glow. And yeah, the little smoke plumes are Stormvermin Fur, for example. And after that is done, everything is washed down with Lamia Medium, Agrex Earthshade 50/50. And even the little insects on the back get the same treatment. And I try to concentrate to have the wash on the top lighter than on the bottom, so it looks like the light is touching him from above. And after this is dry, I have another wash stage that is also 50/50 Lamia Medium and then Seraphim Sepia. And that gives it a little bit of more of a reddish brown tint. And that gives the metal and the armor panels a little bit more of a rusty, corroded, older look. And I really like that. And the reason why I'm washing them twice, Typhus the Twice Washed, that would be a good title as well, is what, because I can apply them much more deliberately on the model. If I would say put both of the washes together without the medium, then it would be really a thick coat over it, and then I couldn't really apply it where I want it exactly. And it can pool, and then the pool is a really too strong filter. And yeah, it's much easier if you do it with two washes, and then you can take it away wherever you don't like it as much. And yeah, I just like the technique, and it's quick and easy as well. The next step is a little bit more time consuming, but it gives the model that kick it needs, that it looks nice on the tabletop. That's edge highlighting. So we do a really stark edge highlight with Stormhost Silver on the metal, and with Hashot Copper on all of the bronze parts. Like even the stuff that has been painted with Hashot Copper before will be highlighted with it again. And then Typhus's helmet gets I have the high flow acrylics titanium white, because the Games Workshop white is absolute garbage. Don't use that unless you dry brush, then it might be good enough. And the red parts are highlighted with Evil Sun Scarlet, and the stuff like the eye lens to make it really bright. And for example, that little scanner thing he has, I paint after the washing step. I paint Stormhost Silver, a really bright silver over it, and then I use Spirit Stone Red over that, just one layer, to make it really pop and make it really bright red. And then one of the most important steps on the armor is that Nurgling Green highlight line. And I concentrate on the outer lines, and then, where possible, on top lines where the sun would touch the armor. And that bright green makes the armor really pop and make it really look good. And to make sure that the pox are really bright yellow, I mixed a 50/50 mix of Flash Gets Yellow and Avalanche Sunset and highlighted them once, and then I highlighted them again with pure Flash Gets Yellow on top of that. And if you want, you can do a fluorescent yellow over them as well, but I didn't do it on that miniature, but that would make it even more glowing and looking like radioactive waste or something. And on the wood grain, for example, I think I forgot to mention how I painted that. The base coat was Stormvermin Fur, and after the washing stage, I used Celestra Grey to paint like small wood grains on top of that, or the edges of that with that color, to make it even brighter. And I highlighted the fleshy parts like the exhausts on top of his carapace with Cadian Flesh Tone. And then the last step, and then the most important step for Death Guard, is weathering, adding some Riser Rust on all of the steel or metal parts. I mean, it's for sure not stainless steel, let's be honest. It's rusting, it's dripping down, and then most importantly, if you add multiple layers of Riser Rust, at first this is more like a brown, and then if you add more and more on the same area, it becomes more orange, and that gives a nice gradient of that rust. And then the next step is obviously Typhus corrosion. We need some more corrosion on Typhus, and this his own name paint has to be used for that. That has little flakes in it that give it a grain and a texture. So I usually use it only on a few bits of the model, and I used it to disguise some mistakes I made here. For example, basically wherever I used sprue glue on and it was too shiny. So I used, I think, 1 or 2 coats on all of the areas, and then I added some wash in the corners where a shadow would be. And then the last step of the metal is adding some verdigris on the copper and bronze bits. And I use nylock oxide for that. And sometimes I dilute it with a little bit of water, but most of the time pure. And then sometimes you can do multiple layers. If you want to, where the water would pool or something, you could add it multiple times so it lays over top of each other. And that is just such a nice excuse to use some turquoise and some orange on your miniature to add those weathering stages, and that just makes the miniature pop so much more. And I added some Nurgle's rod here and there. I have not filmed that, unfortunately, but now the painting stage is done and we can mount him on the base finally. So one of the feet I pinned and I scratched the paint off so the 2 plastic components will stick to each other easier, and I put the insects on his back before. That was a mistake. I should have put him on the base first and then put the insects, because the insects got basically got off the back again when I pressed him into the base. So that was a mistake, so don't do that. But I've mounted him on the base, and now we can have a look at the end result of Typhus. Here is another video the algorithm god has picked for you. And while you're at it, subscribe. Come on, do it. For Papa Nurgle.